Okay, everybody, here we go. Let's do this a second, well, probably the 10th time for me here. Are we ready? And just get audio. Good. Okay. Whoa! Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. Some insane technical difficulties today, but I've got it sorted out. Hopefully we're live and you're seeing me now. And I know some of you have been waiting now for almost 40 minutes for this class to start. So I'm terribly sorry for that to happen. You know, usually I kind of flip a few switches, everything kind of turns on, I do a little kind of adjusting. Today, I do that, nothing's working, nothing's communicating, so I just did a whole hard reset, unplugged everything, plugged everything back in, and here we are. So while that was happening, I have forgone a few of the little things that I normally do at the beginning of each episode, which is to kind of set everything up. And while I was waiting for computers to reboot, I put some of the paint onto my palette. So I'll just kind of show you that here. So here I've got my warm and cool yellow, my cool and warm red, and my cool and warm blue. And if this is the very first time you're tuning into one of these episodes, usually everything goes very smoothly. And I've explained kind of in depth what these different colors are, why we use them, etc. So I'm not going to go that now. We're going to jump right into the artwork for today. So what we're going to paint today is we're going to paint a picture of a couple of sleeping dogs, which, you know, considering all of the craziness in the world today, is probably something we could all use, a little bit of sleeping dogs. So this image here, maybe it's a little big. I'm just going to shrink it down so it fits on the screen here. So this painting is by one of my all-time favorite artists, David Hockney. And David Hockney, you know, is probably one of the most famous, well-known artists alive today. And I imagine there's a few of you who are like, oh, I don't know who he is. Maybe I'm out of the loop. You know, that's probably for a longer discussion of how maybe marginalized the fine art world has become in contemporary culture, which is something that I'm trying to change through exercises like this, where we're painting live and it's free and accessible to everybody, and also to expose people to art that they may not know or even appreciate, right? Maybe you've heard of it but you don't like it. So watching and trying to paint some of this together is really helpful. Anyway, David Hockney, you can see he's a little bit on the older end, although, you know, as I get older, this doesn't seem so old after all. He's a British artist, and he famously moved to Los Angeles in, I think, the late mid-1960s, and was really an important role player in the history of pop art. So while there was, you know, Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein and Klaus Oldenburg and all of these other American pop artists, David Hockney is known as sort of maybe the British pop artist, but also he's sort of an honorary Los Angelino because he spent so many years there in making art in Los Angeles. One of the reasons why he moved to Los Angeles was because of the light. And as a painter, especially as a landscape painter, that was really important to him. Obviously, he's done more than just landscapes. He's also famous for painting lots of different people. And some of these paintings, in fact, if I go back up here, this one here that's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, I think it's this one, or because he made a few versions of this, you know, it's sold for some crazy, you know, $20-30 million or something. I think this one also recently sold for that level of exorbitant sums, maybe even higher than that. I'm not sure. So obviously he's appreciated and well known by a very elite group of people, wealthy people for that matter. But I also think what is great about him is how accessible his art is. You know, they're generally recognizable pictures, very colorful pictures, and particularly because one of his favorite subjects is painting his dogs, right? And if you're a dog lover like myself, that kind of immediately endears him to me. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to make a painting from one of his dogs. I think it's the dog paintings is how he called this whole series, and there's a good book called Dog Days. And he's got these dogs that are don't seem particularly active. I've seen a lot of interviews with him, and these dogs always just seem to be sleeping. So if you look at the paintings of his dogs, it's not like the dogs are running around, leaping, chasing after things, biting people's legs or anything. They're sort of just sitting here while he's making paintings and providing him some, you know, love and companionship, which, you know, is one of the great things that dogs do. Anyway, you've heard enough of me talk about David Hockney, so let's get right into it. So this painting that we're going to recreate is, or we're going to use as inspiration for a new painting, is, you know, depending on how you look at it, deceptively simple or deceptively complex, right? There's these two dogs that are laying here on this dog bed. And, you know, the first thing I'm trying to think about in terms of recreating this painting is, and again, I should also emphasize, I'm going to try to make this painting in about an hour and a half. So I might do things that are different than what David Hockney did, just for the sake of time, because he may have been working on this painting for weeks on end, or he may have done it in 30 minutes. I'm not exactly sure, and I don't know exactly the process he used. So I'm just going to look at it with my eyes and the knowledge I have and try to break it down. So a few of the things that I can see here is that it almost looks like he painted this directly onto a blank white canvas. Like you can see around the dogs here, we have a little bit of the white of the canvas showing through here. So that kind of tells me that he's kind of attacking the canvas sorry, that he's attacking the canvas directly. In some of the previous paintings we've done some washes, some colored washes to begin the painting. And we can still do that for today's painting. It would just be a little bit different than what he would do. And I'm trying to think out loud to myself, should we do that? What is the faster way? You know, one of the reasons why you would not do a wash when you're painting is because you may be working with a subject, like dogs in this instance, which are moving around and may get up and move and change positions, and if you were to put a wash down first and then all of a sudden the dogs get up and move, you're kind of trapped because you've got this kind of halo of where a dog was and now the dog's not there, and then what do you do? So that might be something to kind of keep in mind when you're making paintings in the future. If you're painting a portrait of somebody, or you're painting like a landscape which is very dynamic, then doing the kind of slower classical way of building up layers of paint becomes potentially problematic, right? If you're just painting a still life and you're painting with controlled light, you're not painting outside on your balcony, but painting inside, and you can turn the lights on and off, and they're going to be the exact same at 3 in the morning, then at 1 in the afternoon, then you don't really have to worry. And then in that instance, you can really lay down some initial colors. So, however, the difference is that we are making this painting, recreating it again. So we know these dogs I hope aren't going to get up and move. Although considering all the craziness in the world right now, I just like, who knows what's going to happen. Maybe these dogs could get up off of this canvas and move around. So I think in the interests of time, we will do a couple of quick washes, and it's also going to help cover the surface of the painting a little bit faster. So that, with all that preamble out of the way, let's prepare our surface here. So a few things, one of which is, here's a, and again, it's probably hard to see, but this is a blank canvas direct from the dollar store, right? So it is, I mean, it's been prepared with a light gesso, and what they would often do is probably spray it on, right? That's probably how these canvases were done. Or they have a big sheet of canvas that's already pre-sprayed, and then they wait for it to dry, and then they cut it and glue it onto this cardboard. Now, in the past couple of episodes, I have suggested that you may want to use some gesso. So here's an example of a bottle of gesso. And what we've done, and I think I did this a couple episodes ago, is near the beginning of that episode, is I just took some of this gesso, which kind of looks like white paint, and brushed it over top of the surface of this particular canvas. And it was, I had it on some newsprint, and obviously you could see how when I peeled the newsprint off, some of these little pieces kind of stuck onto the bottom of the paper or of the canvas. So that's what that is. I also let it dry and then put a second coat on top of it. So this will mean that this canvas has 2 layers of gesso. So what I'm going to do here is just really quickly do a quick light sanding on here. You can see this is 220 grit sandpaper, which is a kind of but the same grit as like maybe your fingernail clipper, or if you're to so it's not like the kind of sandpaper you would use to sand down your deck, your patio, or to do the initial sanding on some furniture that you're restoring. But you would use this towards the end of that furniture renewal process. So what I've done here is now created a whole bunch of dust, and that dust can also stick to the surface of the picture. So I'm just going to take a rag, and I'm actually just going to dip it in a little bit of water. So I got a wet rag here, and a kind of a damp rag. And I'm just going to quickly go over this surface to take off that little bit of dust that may have accumulated on there. And I'm just going to do that on my painting surface as well. The reason why you'd want to do that, and I can take another rag and dry it off, is that there's all of that fine dust that's there on the surface right after sanding, and that could potentially get into the paint that I'm using and kind of counteract the whole purpose of putting the gesso down. Putting gesso down. Because the reason why we're putting gesso is to make this a nice smooth surface. Because now this is like a sheet of photocopy paper, and when I paint, the paint is going to get stuck into those grooves. So we're going to be painting in the landscape format today. Just back this out a bit. So we're going to be a little bit wider. And then let's get out, here's the, come on, there we go. So here's the painting itself. So I'm going to draw on this, right off the bat. So one of the first things that I like to do is draw a little line here to get the composition started. Right, so I know where the center is. And in this picture, the center's probably right about here, right? So I'm going to now do a couple of quick drawings. So let's say the top of this, where kind of that cream blue is somewhere up here, right? So I'll put that into place. And then let's say this cushion that they're sitting on is maybe up here to a little past center, and then it comes down again. Right, and then kind of comes back up close to this edge. Something like this. So I'll draw a little bit darker because I know sometimes it doesn't show up on the screen. So this is kind of the blue edge. Here's the kind of the yellow. This will be the yellow part inside here. Okay. And there's no hurry to do this either, right? If you need to take some time to do any erasing or moving of shapes around, that's totally fine. Right? And you could also crop this picture in, right? Let's say you wanted just to focus on one dog. You could do that. There's no reason why you have to draw the whole thing like I'm doing right now. Okay. So now we've got two dogs that we got to draw on this mat. So again, this inner side here is the yellow part here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to try drawing this as some shapes. And so I want to look, and I've done a whole 40 episode series of how to draw. So this is just a kind of a quick little review. But I'm going to imagine that this is like some kind of like a cashew or a bean or something here. Right, this kind of shape here is one dog. And then let's do the same thing here. And they're kind of overlapping a little bit because they're sinking into this mat. So here's this mat kind of comes up here. And then let's draw another shape here. This I'll draw the heads separately in a second. We got this shape here. Like I said, we'll start out with kind of like a circle. So it's sort of like a Lego piece or something, right? And then we'll draw a nose. Okay. There's a bit of an ear here, but we're not going to worry too much about the details because we'll do all of that later. And then we've got a paw here. And then another paw here. Sleeping dogs are quite adorable. Or any kind of pet that when it's sleeping is pretty adorable. And the sounds they make, and you know, when they have bad dreams and they startle themselves awake. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger here. I've got this one foot and a tail. Again, this is a great time just to, you know, practice laying out things, and you can make mistakes. You can get out your eraser and move things around. Don't worry about, you know, we're going to cover every single part of this with some, with paint, so we don't have to worry about it being perfect, right? So then we have kind of a head and a bit of the snout here. Right? And there's one eye sort of here with an ear hanging off the end. I don't know where the other ear is. This, I'm not sure if that's one big ear shape there or not, but I'll just draw it in. Here's I think a kind of paw in here somewhere. Belly with a leg. And if you wanted, you could draw the tail coming off here. And so this body is overlapping this one here. And I'm just going to do a little bit of erasing. Once I've got this down, one thing I sometimes will do is, just do a kind of a gentle erase so that maybe these lines are they're easier to hide with my paint as I'm painting. Because if you've drawn really, really dark, heavy lines, sometimes that paint, it's hard to hide those lines, and sometimes those lines, even the graphite kind of comes through the paint and it mixes into the paint and changes the actual color of your paint. Okay. So let's let's figure out what colors we want in here. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually paint like a cool yellow back here, and I'm going to paint a lot of warm yellow down here. Just to, I mean, I could potentially paint the whole thing with a warm yellow, but I think we could probably get away with using mostly with a little bit of cool yellow. It's just going to make this background, I think, kind of just a little bit more depth. And I think we can also, it'll make that color look kind of cool, even though I don't think that's what he did. Okay, so I'm just going to go right to the cool yellow. I'm going to add some white into it as well, just to tone it, or tint it down a little bit. Because if I put that straight, yellow on there, that could be a little bit loud and bright. And I want to encourage whatever color is on top of this to move backwards in towards, because it's in the background. So I'm just going to put this in here. It's pretty subtle little effect. And you can see I'm deliberately going over some of these lines just a little bit. Because personally, I'm going to try to cover up most of the white space on the canvas. Okay. And I'm not even going to bother washing my brush. I'm just going to go right in here. Let's get the warm yellow on my brush. And same thing, I'm going to put some white in here. I'm just going to dip a little bit of water in there to thin it out a bit. Okay. Just going to, let's say, put this there so you see it. This is the color. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to brush this over top of the whole surface. And as I've said before, don't worry about getting this, if it's okay if the color changes a little bit and it's a little bit more yellow or more white in certain places. I wouldn't worry about that. Because we're going to paint over the whole thing, and those little changes, those differences or discrepancies, or however you want to think of them, are especially on the first layer, are negligible, and they're probably going to have if they're noticeable at all, if anything, they're going to make the whole picture look just a little bit more interesting, because there's going to be that added little bit of nuance kind of under the surface. So, when we look at these here, virtually very little difference between these two yellows. So as I said, I could have just done the warm yellow across the whole surface, and that would have been totally fine. Again, I've already made a change from how David Hockney created his painting here, so I'm sure I'll hear about it in the comments. Not in your. We have a great community of people who are watching these videos, but I do notice that sometimes afterwards, or sometimes even years later, I get some very odd comments on my YouTube videos, and I just had a few this morning, and I sometimes I just think like these people they must be trying just to get a reaction out of me, like it's some kind of like, because they're just so weird. Bank Hall says, hi from Liverpool. Any reason why you draw with a pencil and not thin paint? Great question. Really good question. Okay. Why did I use pencil first? Well, one of which is, especially when I'm trying to paint a little bit faster in this instance, and then I'm going to put a wash over top of it. If I put paint a little bit first, then those colors can mix, and maybe they mix in a way that I like. This way I have a little bit more control over things, so that's why there is plenty of artists who, rather than use a pencil, like you said, use paint, like a very thin paint. They probably would have used like a warm red, or almost like an orange, or a dark brown, earthy tone, and done a lot of this painting. And that is certainly a valid technique, especially more advanced artists would do that. In fact, it wouldn't have surprised me if David Hockney did something like that and actually did the initial painting very quickly with the different colors of paint, especially because he was doing this in a series, so he probably had most of these paints pre-mixed in like little jars because he also has an assistant working with him, so I bet you he had most of these paints because he's painting the same thing over and over and over again, right? So he probably would have done a really quick outline with paint here of the dog and then immediately attacked it and started painting it, because those dogs could get up any minute. The other thing too is, just considering this is an introductory basic class, is there, a pencil is easier to erase than going directly with paint onto the painting. And if I had just done that, I imagine a few people watching right now would be like, whoa, that's like, I don't know if I feel confident enough to just start outlining with the paintbrush, and then we've got a whole bunch of lines that we're going to try to make work, or we've got to now deal with those lines. So absolutely great question. I would say the technique you're talking about is maybe for a little bit more advanced artists, maybe more intermediate artists, and it's fair it's possible towards the end of this course that we would do a little bit more stuff like that. Just because, but I think we would want to use, maybe if we want to start doing that, we'd probably use a simpler composition. And I can think of a few paintings coming down the pipeline that we'll do probably in January that we could use that technique in. So anyway, that's a great example, and it's given me a good reason to let the paint dry while I ramble a little bit here. So thank you very much for that. I also I was really pleasantly surprised that while I had all these tech problems, I was noticing in the chat there that everyone was chatting away and comparing notes and talking amongst yourselves, and that just makes me super excited that because my fear is, oh no, everyone's gonna log off and I'll just be here painting by myself, and that won't be such a problem. I guess people can watch it later on their own time, but you guys managed to entertain yourselves. I appreciate that. So I'm just looking at this and just seeing where things are still a little bit wet. You can use, if you were in a real big hurry, one thing you could do is just take a rag, especially at this stage, and try to kind of, if you brush the paint, especially if you've got thicker paint, you brush it down a little bit, or you wipe it down. Like, so if, when I say brushing it, I literally mean take a brush and take it, and you can kind of brush the paint out and spread it out. And that's going to help the paint dry faster, because rather than being in one clump, it's being spread out. Right? So that would be one way of doing it, or using a rag, or you just using your hand to kind of brush like that. Okay, so let's take a look at the original here and think about what we want to do next. Let's see. What I tend to like to do is to work from the back towards the front. So I think what I'm going to do is paint this blue, and then I'm going to paint the table, this kind of orange sandy color, and I'll be able to use that same color to do the bed here, which is actually very similar to the coat that I've already painted. And then I'll be able to take that same color and I possibly turn it into the color for these dogs, but we'll see when we get there. So just a little heads up of the plan so far. So I'm going to use a bit of a larger brush, the same brush I used for the initial washes, to do the background. And this background looks like a cool blue with a lot of white in it. Okay, I even need more in here. Let's just get a little bit of water on there. I mean, when I say a little bit of water, I mean a little bit of water. The kind of thing where there's maybe 1 or 2 drops of water, just to thin it out a little bit. Okay, so then I can hold this paintbrush, you know, it's close up to here, and I can look at it and like, what's wrong with this scene? It's still a little bit too blue. It needs to become a little bit more of a turquoise, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some yellow to it. Oops, that might be a little bit too much, but let's just mix it in. So that might have been a little much. Let's add a little white back to it. And let's see. So that was my cool yellow and my cool blue. And let's just see. Pretty close. I think I am a little bit more on the green side, so let's bring a little bit of blue back in here. And I think this is going to work really well. I'm also just kind of squeeze a little bit of the paint that was in there out. Let's get a little bit of that blue back. And again, dipping a little bit of water in here, maybe 2 drops of water, because I want this to be thin enough. And I don't mind, again, if I go over some of the pencil lines, because I want to hide them a bit. So what I was doing was just trying to kind of clean away some of the brush strokes, but you could see in his painting he allowed those brush strokes to be there. So okay, again, this looks still, I think it's actually appearing a little bit more blue than it does on my side. I think it's also, when this dries, it's going to look a little bit more like the one that we see there originally. If I wanted it to have a little bit more of a green quality, I could put a little more yellow in there. But again, don't forget there's yellow underneath that blue, which is going to come through and kind of potentially change this color a little bit, right? So let's see. There's also, so now we've got this, while I'm doing blue here and green, maybe before I wash my paintbrush, I'm actually going to do a little bit of that color here. And I'm going to add a little bit of, let's just see what this mixture is if I take the warm blue, because I want the warm blue that's in the foreground, right? So I don't want too much cold colors in the foreground if I can avoid it. So I'm just seeing what this looks like. So right now, this blue that I've mixed here actually is a bit of a gray quality, because I've got these two colors in here, which are how to explain this. So if we think about the color wheel again, we have yellow, and we've got the cool blue, which has a little bit of yellow in it. And then I just mixed it with the warm blue, which has a little bit of red in it. So what that's doing is it's turning this color towards the neutral core. It's sort of sucking the intensity out and drawing this color into, let's say if we imagine this is the outer edge of the color wheel, it's pulling it in towards the core. So that's why it's getting a little bit of a grayish tone to it. And I don't know if I like that. So David Hockney is famous for his really bright colors. So I am going to try my best to ensure I've got some nice bright colors for this painting. So let's go back to the drawing board. And I'm going to take some of this cool blue, or warm blue, my apology, warm blue. And let's get, I need some more white that doesn't have any other colors in it. My palette's already pretty full, hey? So I'm going to take this paint and let's just try it here. I know this is a little bit different order of things than I said I was going to do. So I'm noticing that my initial yellow that I put down there is still a little bit wet, so I'm actually putting a little bit of water back on my brush again, just because the paint is kind of sticking to the paint that's there, and that little bit of water is just going to help increase the fluidity of the paint ever so slightly. Okay, I'm going to switch to a smaller brush here because it's going to drive me crazy trying to do some of that detail with a big brush. So I'm not worried about sort of the dry brush quality of some of this paint. I do just want to cover the surface, and then we're going to come back and touch things up later on, because we got other colors that are going to go next to these colors. Okay, I'm going to wait for this to dry before I start trying to brush in any other things here. This is kind of a good little placeholder. you could see the reason why I know that the yellow is still, and maybe even the original paint or the gesso is, after I wiped it down after sanding, is still wet, is when I'm applying the brush strokes to it, I can see like this, each time I touch there, it's sort of, the paint is not sticking to the layer below it very well, right? The paint is like, every time it gets there, it's like peeling the layer of paint off. So it's a little bit frustrating when that happens. Okay. This green here. Okay. So that green is very similar to the green up top there. So I'm going to use the same sort of colors. Again, it's a little bit of a kind of this same green that we had here. Very similar, actually. But a little bit less white in there. Oops, that's too much yellow. Let's just see. I think one thing I probably put that rag that I used to clean or to wipe off that sandpaper, I think was too wet. I should have just, I could have brushed it off with my hand or used a vacuum cleaner if I was in as much of a hurry as I am to kind of get a painting done in a short amount of time. Oops, sorry, let's get that out of the way. Okay. Coolness. Okay, we got a bunch of stuff. Main parts in there. And I see he's got a little bit. Well, there's a little bit of blue here. I think that might be, what we were talking about earlier of painting in some lines. It's possible that he actually painted this in with a bit of a blue. It sort of looks like maybe that's what this residue is, but. So you know what? I'm going to put a little bit of this color I've got on my brush right here. I'm just going to lay a little bit of that into a few little places here. Just a couple little touches of it. Okay. Those will disappear mostly, but I think we'll appreciate that later on. Okay. Clean my brush. Another thing about David Hockney is he was really one of the first artists to really embrace acrylic paint. So acrylic paint, in terms of its use in fine art, is really new if we think of how long people have been making art. So acrylic paint has sort of been around since like the 1930s, but didn't really get widely used until the 1960s. And David Hockney was one of the first to really embrace the use of acrylic paint in paintings. Because there's not so much today, but even when I was an art student, people looked a little bit down on acrylic paint. It was sort of still seen as a bit of like the amateur artist, the beginner's artist to paint, children's paint, and then eventually you graduate to oil paint. And there is still, again, those prejudices against acrylic paint, but Andy Warhol, David Hockney, a lot of the pop artists used acrylic paint. And one of the reasons they did that is to get brighter colors. Now, oil paint, you can get just as bright colors with oil paint these days, but initially when acrylic paint first came out, they were able to kind of synthesize different colors and make more saturated colors. So that's one of the reasons why artists switched to it. And a pop artist wanted that bright commercial look of their artwork. So let's see, what do we do? Let's paint this background, and we'll touch up a little bit in here, and then we're going to do the dogs. So, and things are going to come together pretty quickly with this painting as we go here. So let's say what we want for this table, and I think I'm going to switch to a little bit smaller brush here. I wonder, let's see, can we get away with that color directly on here? It is a little, you know what, I'm going to put a little bit of white in here. Just a tad bit of white in that color. Even when I mix more in here, I think that would be helpful. So I think this color, actually, let me see. It's tough to say. It looks good to my eyes when I'm painting it, and I look up at the screen and it looks very, very bright. I think what it needs is we're gonna turn this a little bit more towards brown. So I'm gonna put some. We're gonna mix a brown here. So I need a little bit more yellow. And I'm gonna take some of this warm blue. Okay, so here we've got this is closer to the actual color of the dog. Now I've got this paint on my brush. I'm just going to wipe some of it off and come back to this color here. All right, so now let's see. There's a little bit closer. It's a little bit on the darker side, so I can just go back over some of my lines and brighten them up with just adding a little bit more of that same warm yellow back into the paint. Okay, so I've got this, and I think I might actually just, while I'm right here, go back to this brown. I'm going to make this just a little bit darker, and I'm going to add this little bit of shadow and darkness right here, right now. just a little bit down here. Even though the light, I think, is coming from that side, we'll have just a little bit of darker stuff down here. Okay. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this same kind of color without even washing my brush, and let's just get a lot of white on here for the matte inside. Although, now that I do that, you see how this is now becoming more like a skin tone. Now that I really tint this like that. I don't know if that's fully appropriate for here. So let me think about it. I'm gonna actually wash my brush a bit here. And I think what I'm gonna do is I like that really bright color, so let me just see what it looks like if I mix the warm and yellow together and add some white to this. Basically I'm adding my two whites together. And then, there we go. Or sorry, I'm adding my two yellows together. My apologies. Just brushing over that initial blue. There's a bit of yellow in here, not much. Or sorry, there's a bit of white in there, but not much. That's why it's not really covering too much of this picture. Or my pencil lines, I mean. If you're wondering why. So this is just almost just sort of slightly changing the color of the background. It's not too different. There's some kind of interesting little stippling thing that he's doing here in the foreground. I'm not sure what that was about. While we're here, why don't we just add a little bit of, oh, I got a little bit of blue on my brush and it's turning kind of into a bit of a gray. So maybe while that's happening, I'm just going to use that to my advantage because he's got a bit of a gray thing going here as a shadow. So I'm just going to paint that in there. But now that looks like I'm touching things up a little bit, and I don't like that. So I'm going to take this same brown that I had here, paint this in here. I'm going to have to, just looking at this, I'm probably going to have to come back here and do something later on because I'm not happy with the way that that's turning out. It looks more like I'm trying to hide something here rather than use this as a shadow. So, but I don't want to spend too much time right now because after I put these dots here, maybe it does work. Maybe that I've found it integrates itself really well. So we don't know. We don't know until we get the dogs in here. Now, previously I mixed a brown here, and I mixed that brown with my warm yellow. So let's turn it this way. I mixed this brown using warm red and warm yellow and a little bit of warm blue. And that's how I made this brown. Okay. And his brown is a little bit more on the reddish side. So I'm going to take some red and dig into this blue. Okay. And let's just see what this looks like if we start painting with it. Beautiful. Okay. So it gets a little tricky when we've got, we're starting to cover some of these pencil lines. So one of the techniques that I do for that kind of thing is, I try to kind of keep these brush strokes going in certain directions. That kind of helps me see where certain parts of... You can also leave little white lines for yourself. So while I'm right here and I got this paint, I'm just going to keep on going. I'm going to do the other dog. Same thing. You see how just leaving a little line there for the ear. Oh, and this is going to have to lighten up, so I want to be careful here how much more I do on that belly. Okay, so what we've got here, what we call like the local color, like kind of the main, the color that's in all of the colors we've painted here. And now I'm going to start going darker and then lighter. And you can do one or the other. It's up to you. There's no kind of reason to go in one direction first. I've got this previous brown that I've mixed, which is kind of a nice darker brown. If I want to make it a little bit darker, it's going to take a little bit of blue. And that's going to make it a little bit darker again. Adding a little more blue in here, and that blue is going to work really well for kind of some darker areas and outlines, and it still seems brown, right? it in with something a little bit lighter. Okay, let's do the same over here on this ear, dark ear here, and I can now cover up any lines. Black to this mixture. Now if I keep on going, what's going to end up happening is this is going to start going a bit purple. So I'm just going to add a little bit more yellow back into here to keep it from going purple. And I want it to go brown but not purple. I'm just getting a little brush to help me with some of these darker areas here. Okay, and I'm just going to take this and go much darker now. Let's go back in here and get this one dog. I'm gonna have to go darker again, but it's easier to kind of build up the darkness than going too dark too quickly, and then you're like, ah, no. Right, so you just take your time. I'm not an expert on dog anatomy, so I'm not exactly sure what's happening right in here. I think this is supposed to be the forearm somewhere, or front arm of the body, or not sure what you call that part of a dog. Forearm? Front leg? The hind legs or the back legs? What is the front leg of a dog? Good question. Okay, so now I'm going to do a little bit of this belly here. So I'm just going to take the same paint. Let's just add a little bit of white on here. Okay. Needs to be even more white, but and more brownish too. So I'm gonna add a little more black to it, and then more white to it. too much white, I think. That's why it's looking like that. So I'm going to... I might have to wait for that to dry a little bit. But that's what happens sometimes. So just got a little more red on my brush. And I'm going to take this red and just sort of draw it back over top of this white just to make that blend in a bit better. Also just going to take the same color that I've been using for the belly and just apply it a few other places so that it doesn't stick out too much like a sore thumb. Got to integrate it a little bit more in here. So I'm kind of putting it on the bottom side of this animal. So that's kind of made things look a little bit fleshy and pinkish, right? Which is fine, but I think I'm going to have to go back and darken some of this here with this same paint that's on my brush. So I'm just going to take, without washing my brush, we're going to mix another brown, incorporating some of that white in there. So this is a real dark brown, almost a little bit violet. If it's too violet, we'll put a little more yellow back in there. Okay. That makes me feel better. I'm not exactly sure with the anatomy of this dog here. Something feels a little bit weird with that front leg. You know, and this could have been a part of the painting where the dog got up and moved, and there was some kind of confusion on his part as to how to paint that. You can see I'm kind of making a little bit of a change. I'm trying to bring that ear out because I felt it was a little bit hard to see originally. I'm maybe going to try to integrate that a little bit more. Just adding a little more red on my brush. It doesn't stand out too much, but it's still there. Okay, and then we'll come back to this painting. I'm getting pretty close. I feel pretty close. I'm going to do a little bit more work on these dogs and then touch up the mat that they're on, and then we'll be pretty close to being done. Sorry, my big head in the way there. That was a little too much, so I'm going to back it off a bit with a little bit more red. A little bit more white, just too much. Well, I'm really overthinking this painting and probably making it way more complicated than it is. And I've got, I'm kind of painting with a bit of dry paint here, and that is tricky to do. It's also very strange to me how different things look on camera than they are in person. Sometimes little things really stick out more than they do when I'm looking at them right in front of my face here, which is kind of odd experience, but okay. I'm going to take this same color and just put it on this belly here too. Okay, I'm just going to get a lot more darkness in here. Just a few places where I need it to be darker. And so I'm just putting some of this blue on my brush. Get a little bit of white or water on here just to kind of help with the brushability. You can hear our daughter upstairs having some bit of a tough time. So this color is going a bit purple like that. You can see I haven't used any black in this painting at all. Because neither has David Hockney. don't see an eye on this dog, but I'm just going to give my own little eye up there. Okay. How's that? Pretty good. So now I've got these little bit of shadows. Do I want to do anything there or not? And some of this texture to finish it all off. You know, one of the things, just as a technical thing, drives me a little bit nuts because I put too much. I really ultimately, one of the things I'm seeing the wisdom of why he used the white canvas here, or I could have just used the yellow that I put down here, is instead of getting this white tint on the belly here, we still have the full intensity of those red colors. They're just mixing optically with the white below. So, but I mean, he obviously has been painting these dogs for years, and he's been studying it and probably made that same, potentially that same error at some point and then fixed it on his own. But anyway, okay. I'm going to use a little bit of this blue and white. Blue and white, just to kind of take some of the intensity of that blue down. And just come in here. Bit of a blue shadow here. It's kind of hard to know if I overdid it there or not. My instinct is to want to keep on fiddling with it, but you know, I'm going to just leave that. I'm going to continue with this darker blue. Again, it's darker blue with just a little bit of white. Right? So I'm taking some of this white from elsewhere, mixing it in here, because otherwise that blue is going to be just too dark, too intense. You know, again, I really appreciate everybody for sticking around. Holy smokes, what a... that is a very flustering experience. Anybody who's ever done any kind of presentation and you have tech problems, it really throws you for a bit of a loop. And it can be very discouraging and frustrating. You know, it's... And the fact that so many of you guys stuck around here while I was going through that was, you know, very generous and kind of you. I appreciate that. Okay, I think we need... We're pretty close. I'd say we're probably 5 minutes from being done. and every time I say that again, you can just usually add another half hour to things. But I do feel reasonably hopeful at this moment that we're close. So I'm just adding a little bit of extra color on top of here, just as he did. And I'm being slow and steady. You know, I always say accidents happen when you're close to home. So I'm being careful not to go too much white at one time here. I'm just blending a little bit in, and then it looks okay. That's good. Let's add a little bit more white. And I'm also just gonna allow some of these brush strokes to kind of come through as he did. Our poor daughter up, I don't know if you can hear her through my microphone. Woke up this morning very unhappy. We were worried maybe she had chicken pox or something, but you know, she just crying and crying, which she never does. So that's always a little bit alarming when your child does something totally different than normal. And then 20 minutes later, has her bottle, and all of a sudden it was like nothing happened. I'm like, oh, okay. But there she's at it again, so. What am I doing here? Why did I get this dark line there? I don't know. Oh, I see what I did. I cut in there a little bit, so let's just fix that. Okay, now this green on the bottom, and then I think we're done. We'll just tackle that. I'm gonna wash my brush. You'd see why I've come back to this afterwards rather than doing all this refined work, because it allows me just to clean up any edges or parts of it I wasn't happy with. And sometimes you spend all this time doing all this work, and then you realize you've got to come down here and fix stuff to make all this other stuff work anyway, right? So I'm not going to waste all my time at the beginning of the painting. So let's see if I remember how to mix this paint, right? So this was my cool blue, my cool yellow, and adding some white to the mixture. So I'm going to start with a bit of on the darker end of things. And then we'll go even darker. I'm just going to mix some more blue into here. Not too much, but just enough. Okay, even a little bit more. I'm just using little bits sparingly so that it just creates that variety of colors and value that is really important. Okay. So for that last little bit of shadow down here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my dirty brush. Let's just mix some of the dark or the warm blue, sorry, on here. And I could even add just, let's say, even a little bit of this cool red in the mixture. That's going to make it, that's pretty dark compared to that. It doesn't, you know, you're like, oh, it still looks like a purple. Well, it's, whatever color it is, it's much, much darker than anything else on this canvas. All right, that looks a little too bluish to me, so let's take some of the purple, take a little bit of the yellow. We're getting kind of brown. Let's take some more blue. There we go. Now we're getting a much darker color because we've got a bunch of colors from the color wheel on here. And I'm going to get an even smaller brush. I like this here, so I'm just going to add a couple this darker color in a few little spots on this body. Okay, I think there's more I could do here, but for the sake of everybody, I think I'm gonna call this a painting. Oops, I realize I'm off the center a bit. Donna says, your picture's very cute. Thank you, Donna. Gail says, maybe your daughter's teething. And Donna says, I was thinking that also, Gail. I think she is, yeah. She's definitely going through a number of changes. She's got she's, gosh, almost 15 months now. So, Every day is an adventure, right? Okay. Have I missed anything? I think there's a few things. There's a little bit of brown in here. Again, that shadow I could rework, but I think for all intents and purposes, we've got everything here. So, let's turn this over. And so this is my name. Dog painting number 46. I think this is 1995, I think. Okay, a piece of newsprint hanging on there. Oh, that looks good. I'm happy with that. I can live with that. So, where's my original here? Oh, here we go. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into another episode. Thank you so much for your patience while I was going through all those difficulties. It means a lot to me. If you enjoyed this, I would love to see your painting that you made in response or along with me. You could send that through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. The links are in the description below. I would love it if you shared this video with your friends and family on your Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, or whatever else there is out there, Twitch, Snapchat, whatever, I don't know. I can't remember, think of all the different ones out there. Anyway, yeah. And I can't remember. Oh, Donna says, where's the ear? Or Sue says, where's the ear on the dog in the foreground? So that's, in his own image, that ear is a little bit obscure. So I've kind of gone along with that and haven't accentuated it. Again, I could spend some time really looking on pictures on the internet for dogs and try to get the anatomy right. I can't remember. So if you want to make that ear a little bit darker or brighter, however you want, you can go to it. For me, it's a very subtle hint that there's an ear right there. So, but you're welcome to paint your picture however you like, right? So, and again, I'd love to see your images. I think next week I want to do a special episode where I show all of the images that you guys have been sending me, and just spend the whole time. It'll probably be not on our regular day. It'll be a special session. So if you have your painting that you would like to show and you'd like to get some feedback, I just got a few emails from people sending me who've just started the program. So they're just sending me the stuff they've started working on with Matisse and the shortcake that we made right at the beginning. Seems like ages ago, by Mary Pratt. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, for watching, following along, and your patience earlier. Have yourself a wonderful rest of your week. Oh, and I see Donna just contributed $13.99. Thank you so much for doing that, Donna. It's using the super chat function, the little $sign where you enter your comments. Anyway, everybody, have yourself a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you next week for another wonderful painting session. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and bye-bye.